And we're following up that last video. We're going to talk about Death's Gambit, that game that came out yesterday. I only played the first area and made it to what I think is like the hub world, but this is sort of like a first impressions thing. If I end up beating the game anytime soon and decide to give fuller thoughts, then I'll do that. But that's what's going on here. So the main thing is I really like these, like, I mean, for lack of a better word, Souls-like games, where it's like, you go and explore this massive world, and then when you die, come on camera, work with me here. Work with it. See, it's focused here. It should be focused back here. That's the whole point. It's we're working on it. Whoa. I like these games where it's like you explore this massive world and then you go around, and then when you die, you drop some stuff, and then you gotta go back and pick up the stuff, and then you can keep going because it adds stakes to your death, and without like it being kind of ridiculous. Because part of the problem with something like Super Metroid, and I might make a video about this at some point, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but part of the problem with something like Super Metroid is that when you die, you just kind of go back to the save point, and like you could just go somewhere else, and there's no punishment for that. It's like the whole idea is that like with Hollow Knight and with Dark Souls and with now Death's Gambit and with Salt and Sanctuary, it's like, no, if you die, then, like, you gotta go back to where you died. You gotta go back and get that thing before you figure out anything else. And you can retreat after that, but, like, you died. That's your consequences, that you left that stuff behind, and you gotta deal with it. Of course, you can go around and do a bunch of other things before you go get it, or you could die again and then permanently lose all that stuff. But the whole point is that stuff is there, and you need to go get it, right? With Hollow Knight especially, now since I've been playing that a lot before Death's Gambit came out, like the stakes are very high at first in the early game. It's just later on where it doesn't really work as well, in my opinion, but whatever. So with Death's Gambit, they have a lot of these mechanics, and at first I was kind of confused on how this works, but Death's Gambit, despite the obvious Dark Souls comparison, even more so than something like Hollow Knight, or even, I mean, Salt and Sanctuary is definitely the closest. I'll say that. But the thing with Death's Gambit is that they don't have you drop your currency. So, like, for example, in Dark Souls, Souls was your currency, or in Bloodborne, Blood Echoes, or whatever it was your currency, right? And in Hollow Knight, that's Geo. And that's what you lose when you die. Well, in this game, that's not how it works. They actually kind of lower the stakes a little bit, but it still works. Because the idea is that when you die, you lose one healing charge. So you have, like, let's say Estus, but in this case it's feathers. So what happens is that you go and you rest at a statue thing, and then you have, like, let's say 4 healing charges on your feather, right? So then what happens is then you go in and you try and fight the boss and you die. And then it's like, hey, you lost one of your feathers, right? Now you can go and do whatever you want, but that feather is going to be there, and that's one permanent healing charge that you've lost. So either you go and you fight the boss and you get your healing charge back, or you go around and explore with the knowledge that your limit, your range that you can reach with that exploration is now limited by the fact that you've lost that healing charge. But then what you can do is then the currency comes back into play with the fact that you can go and pay the statue currency to get back your healing charge. I think that system's, like, really cool. Like, that's like really good. And I'm a huge fan of that. I like how that's all set up. Now, we'll get there. So then you can also use this currency to sacrifice one of your healing charges in favor of a buff. That's also really cool. That's kind of like a Dark Souls 3 kind of thing, where you had the Ashen Estus, where you could get more, like, of your magic charge, whatever you want to call it, meter. You could get a refill for that instead of a refill for your health, and you would trade amongst them, and I think that's really cool. This system, I think, is even better. I think the idea that you could sacrifice a charge for more power, I think it's more simple, because with Dark Souls 3 with the Ashen Estus, there are some characters that are just like, well, I don't use that much. Like, all I used Dark Souls 3's magic meter for was for the supercharge, where you got, like, more power. So it's like, if that's the case, if that's my character build, then you might as well have it so that way it builds up your power anyway. And it's not like just ups your strength, right? It upgrades all of your stats. That means every single class, every single playstyle is equally benefited by the sacrifice of the healing charge, and equally hurt by that lack of a healing charge, right? So I think that system works out really, really well. In that sense, because there's a risk-reward aspect to it. There's a balancing act. Oh, I'm tired. That I really, really appreciate. So that's that. Now, we have some problems. The main thing is that the animations are the biggest issue with Death's Gambit, and I'm like dead serious. I wish like Dan Root could play this game and be like, yes, the animations are the biggest problem with Death's Gambit, because the problem is that when you do something, it doesn't feel like you're doing it. There's no recoil, there's no oomph to anything that goes on. So what happens a lot of the time when you're fighting dudes is that this dude just kind of going just waggling around his sword, and then you take damage, and you're like, where did I take damage? Because there's no recoil. When you get hit, a little number pops up, and that's about it. There's a little bit of invincibility frames, but there's no like, ow, I'm hurt, I'm bouncing back, or something to make it feel like you got hit, right? And the same thing happens with you. When you hit the enemy, it's just sort of like, and it's like, okay, but then like, how do you, like, it doesn't, it's hard to register that hit. You don't feel like that the enemy got hit, right? And then with the dodge roll, it's the same thing. You can dodge through attacks kind of like you did in Salt and Sanctuary, but it's hard to tell where the actual like invincibility aspect of that roll is, because like in Salt and Sanctuary, the whole idea is you could roll past enemies because it's a 2D plane, and the roll is like you can roll in front of them or behind them, or that kind of thing, right? But it's hard to tell in Death's Gambit when those when that all takes place, because there's a lot of times when I roll and then I take a hit, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because I don't know when that starts and when it ends. It's not clear. Where with something like Dark Souls, when you hit the ground in a roll, you know that that's when you're taking the invincibility frames, and so on and so forth. If you're jumping in your roll, then you don't have invincibility frames because you haven't started rolling yet, right? And that's kind of the idea with that. And so similarly, in Salt and Sanctuary, there's this momentum aspect to your roll where you knew that at a certain point that this is when you could actually take invincibility frames and that kind of thing. So then you knew when to roll to do it. Where with Death's Gambit, it feels like this arbitrary learning process that I still haven't figured out. And so there's a lot of times when I went into like the first boss, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna dodge roll around, and then sometimes I got hit and died, and then sometimes I didn't, and it felt kind of like luck. It didn't really feel like it was me doing it, because of the fact that I couldn't tell when I would get hit or when I wouldn't get hit, and what distinguishes those two things. So, great systems, great world, great level design, but the animations almost kill it for me, and I'm very disappointed with it, because I was very much looking forward to this game. But that lack of a punch, that lack of a like I did it, and that makes it so hard to like play the game. It makes it so hard to dodge these enemies, and they demand a lot from you. So I hope that there's some update or something that kind of adds some sort of oomph to everything you do and everything the enemies do, so that way you have a better idea of what's going on. Because in the state it is now, I just don't want to go back and play it. It feels kind of random. It feels kind of like, I don't know whether, it doesn't feel like I did it. It doesn't feel like I'm the one that's doing these things. I'm the one that dodged that attack. I'm the one that swung my sword there. It just kind of feels, and I don't like it. But I might continue, but at this point I'm just going to go back to Hollow Knight. And now, at the end of the video, I'm like, hey, go check out my main channel, MML commentaries, blah, blah, blah. Okay, goodbye.